Hey, Cougar family. Welcome to Season 1 of the CougsFirst podcast, your one-stop business network, a podcast all about life, business, and the best college in the world, Washington State University. Join us each episode to hear stories from your favorite Cougs, interviewed by yours truly, Kelsey Knutson, class of 2012. We're so glad you're here, and we can't wait to dive into this week's conversation. So grab a cup of coffee, crack open that beer, or pour a glass of wine, and let's kick off another episode of the CougsFirst podcast. All right, Coug family. Today, we have a legend. Today, we're going to have some fun. We're going to give you a little history lesson. We're going to talk about Old Crimson, but I am joined by Cameron, aka CJ McCoy, who has this crazy passion side hustle. Is that a fair assessment of what you do? Part of what you do, and you also have this cool job that I think a lot of people have no clue what it is. And so I say, let's do a little bit of both. Let's educate the people and let's talk about this flag that's been popping up all over ESPN game day. And I want to start, CJ, with you. Tell the audience just a little bit about who you are and how you ended up at WSU, your connection there.
Okay, well, I think it's probably appropriate to talk about my connection to WSU first.
Yeah, I agree.
I grew up in Oregon, in Beaverton, and I happened to be sitting in a Sears getting my car fixed, my Mazda 626, which is, if you're old enough, you know what those are, getting that sucker fixed. And I looked up and I was watching this football game that happened to be playing. And it turns out it was the Apple Cup, the Snow Bowl in 1992. And I watched the Cougs beat the Huskies, and in that moment said, you know what, I think I'd like to go there. Turns out that a woman who went to high school with me, she was a year ahead of me, three-sport all-star athlete, like incredible athlete, also decided to go to WSU. So she obviously was a year ahead of me. And she is now Drew Bledsoe's wife. And so the weird connections to WSU and Beaverton, Oregon for me are pretty strange. But Mara and Drew are just fabulous Cougs. And I don't know them very well at all, but I'm just proud to say that I'm in the Coug family with them, particularly athletically. So anyway, that's how I ended up at WSU, sort of randomly not wanting to go to the University of Oregon or Oregon State and watching Drew beat the Huskies in the Snow Bowl in 92. I don't know. Here we are. Many years later.
Yeah. And could you just bring people up to speed a little bit about your career? Because I do think it's interesting. We were just talking about before we were recording how what you do isn't exactly something people know much about growing up and stuff. And so I think it would be really interesting to hear just your quick educational path, and then let's get into some fun.
Yeah, sure. I mean, WSU was really great for me. I had the chance to complete several degrees on the undergraduate side of it, did Army ROTC, and then went into the Army. I went to WSU to study architecture. Obviously, I'm not an architect at the moment. So, you never know what you're going to end up with. Yeah. And then along the way, I found my way back into higher education. And I think a lot of that has to do with my memories of my time at Washington State and how important that was and impactful it was for me. And in fact, I remember one day I had started working at the University of Oklahoma. This is back in 2007. And I happened to be walking across WSU's campus. And I kept thinking to myself, oh, that's really cool. We should do that. Oh, we should do that. And the next thing I knew, I thought that I wanted to be an academic administrator. And so here I am many years later serving as the provost of Shenandoah University, which is outside of D.C. at the top of Virginia, about 70 miles outside of D.C. And of course, my joke every year when I introduce myself to our incoming students is that I left WSU desperately wanting to be a provost, because who doesn't want to be a provost, right? And then I make them Google what a provost is, because nobody has any idea what that job is, except maybe Kirk and some folks on your WSU campus. But a provost is effectively the chief academic officer of a university. We're responsible for all of your academic experiences, including the faculty's work in research service and teaching, and the pathways for all of our students. I call them learners, but all of our students to progress onto their degrees. And depending on where you are, a provost may have an even bigger portfolio than that. But in its simplest form, we're the chief academic officer.
That's awesome. And you've been working at a lot of different schools, lots of different universities. What do you think makes WSU so special? in particular?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I've had the opportunity to work at three different institutions, University of Oklahoma, and then I was at Lehigh University for 7 years, and now at Shenandoah. And, you can walk onto a campus pretty quickly and decide whether you want to be there, whether you want to work there or go to school there. And there's just something really, really special about walking onto campus in Pullman, Washington for that very first time. And you can feel it, right? And then that, I think, persists across every one of WSU's campuses. There's just something about this sort of connection to the place that is Washington State. And it's a challenge to describe what that is, but, anybody you talk to anywhere in the world, you see them with the Coug hat on. You say, "Go Cougs," and they say, "Go Cougs back." You know what we're talking about. And you don't have to explain it. It's just, it's, I think, a lot to do with the community and the time that you spend there. And maybe you've spent too many hours in the Coug or, downtown at my office or wherever people go these days. But the reality of it is that it's just a really unique and compelling, important experience that I wish more people had the opportunity to experience.
Yeah, which is a beautiful unintentional segue into this other part that you're tied to, which is Old Crimson. So for the people who live under a rock and don't know what it is, could you explain what it is? And then let's dive into that little project.
Sure. I mean, there's a little known fact that there's a show called ESPN Game Day. That
I think people know that. Yes, I hope so.
I mean, it's not many people know about it.
Yeah.
So I'm glad your listeners can discover this thing. It runs from 9 to noon on Saturdays, 9 to noon Eastern on Saturdays, and they go around to different campuses. And somehow there has been a Washington State flag flying in the background of that show for 285 consecutive episodes. It's been a couple of years that the flag has been flying, but there's some really passionate Coug fans that make sure that happens every single week.
Okay. I'm just going to be nosy here and ask what I want to know personally, which is, does any other school do this? Is WSU like the only one who's this committed?
So for a very long time, my answer would be absolutely not. And I will say that we still get folks who will come up to our waivers that week and say, "Oh, you're the guy," as though some random Coug has been flying around for 20 years, following the show every single week in his private jet, and flying a flag. And so almost every other school thinks that's what happens. But no, Clemson, I think, actually is the closest. They've been going for 3 or 4 years now. Probably longer, but we don't count theirs. But they're always there, right there with us, and have a pretty. But I've been to Clemson's campus, and I can understand, other than the quality of their football, how similar our campuses are and the connection to the place. Clemson and Washington State are pretty similar in that regard. So it doesn't surprise me that Clemson's fans have A, figured it out, and B, are following in our footsteps.
And sometimes that competition's fun.
Yeah. Well, we don't really think of them as competition so much as partners. I mean, it's not like ESPN is calling them and saying, "Hey, we need to make sure your flag gets on our show." They sure are for Coug fans. So
yeah. Okay, and then give the history. How did this all start, and then how did you get connected to it?
Well, there's a guy some folks know by the name of Tom Pounds, who just so happened to decide one day that he was going to try to get Washington State some recognition. And the goal originally was, this is back in the 2002, 2003 timeframe when we were very, very good, top 10 football. He was going to try to convince ESPN Game Day to come to Washington State. So he drove from his home in New Mexico all the way to Austin, Texas, and stood among a sea of Texas fans in his crimson gear, which, if you know about Oklahoma, Texas, you don't really want to wear crimson in a sea of burnt orange. But there's Tom, all 6'5" of him, or however tall he is, holding this Washington State flag up in the air. And that was the very first showing. And immediately, Coug fans everywhere were reaching out and saying, "Wait, I want to do that. How do I do that?" And so message boards and CougFan.com, I think, was the OG message board that was used, and Tom was coordinating people and trying to FedEx the flag around everywhere, and it ended up starting the streak in Madison, Wisconsin, on October 18th, 03. I think it's the right year. Anyway, and so ever since then, we haven't missed a game. It's Tom did yeoman's work of coordinating and shipping the flag around for a number of years, although I can't remember the exact year. I was in the midst of my doctorate, and Tom didn't know that, but he messaged me one day and said, "Hey," I was at Oklahoma, and he said, "Hey, you seem like you're kind of gung-ho about this." And I was like, "Oh, okay. I don't know why I seem different than anybody else." And he said, "I'm going to go back and get my master's degree so I can be a teacher. Would you mind taking this over?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay. Sure."
Yeah, I'm not busy at all.
Yeah, I know. I mean, you don't get that opportunity very, very often, right? For someone to say, "Look, here's this legendary thing that means so much to so many Cougars everywhere, and you could perpetuate that." And so I didn't hesitate. I said, "Absolutely, I'll take it." And so Tom, made that possible. And from there, we've added several other people and really formalized, I think, the organization. But, I would be remiss if I didn't mention John Bly, who also started the Old Crimson Booster Club with Tom back in the day. And I don't think he gets enough due credit for the work that he did to make this financially possible. So he created the 501c3 that is the OCBC, we call it. And then a guy by the name of Will Walker has been recording and documenting the history of the flag from day one. And he still gets up at 4:00 in the morning Seattle time to record the show and make sure that we don't miss anything. And then along the way we picked up a couple of other folks. Mike Crawford up in Spokane does a lot of our artwork and digital items and put our website together and still manages all of that and gave us Old Crimson email accounts and all those things. And then Kira Bottles joined us a few years back and does most of our social media work, save for Twitter. She does almost everything else and is very busy every Saturday morning as well. So we have this really wonderful group of people who are making certain that we're not only recording, but we're making certain that the flag gets where it needs to go, along with the many, many alumni out there who are going way out of their way to make sure we don't miss a day.
And what does ESPN look for to have a game day? Because they finally came up to Pullman. So maybe you don't know the answer, but what's the criteria they're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of know the answer, and let me caveat that by saying that I think at this point, and ESPN would probably say the same, that we're basically a part of the set, but we do not get any information ahead of time any sooner than anybody else. I mean, I watch their Twitter feed to find out where we're going, right? But you can generally guess where they might go, and there's probably some prop bets out there of people guessing where they're going to go every week and seeing if they can hit the trifecta on it. But it's usually high-ranked team versus high-ranked team. And there were several years, not surprisingly, that Oregon was our potential opponent for a college game day show. And they're looking at, potential viewership and where have they not been before, although they go to the same places over and over and over again. We can talk about that later. But the reality of it is that there were 2 or 3 times where game day was going to come to Pullman if everything worked out. But our friends down south in Oregon lost the week before. And so, of course, that takes it off the table. Right. So
I'm like, are you blaming U of O right now?
No, I would never. My parents went to Oregon. Go Cougs. No, here's a good example for you. Like, I was certain they were going to go to Pasadena for USC UCLA. And then, UCLA lost to Arizona. So they went to Montana State. Right. So it really is, in many, many days, it's a crapshoot, but all kind of predictable as well. You can always guess where they're going to go at the beginning of the season.
Gotcha. I mean, that's crazy because that's so many different factors. And they make that decision. Do they make it like Sunday for that next weekend? Is it
Usually, yeah.
Oh my
Sometimes they
gosh.
wait even longer if
Wow.
they're really struggling about where they're going to go. And you know what behind people don't understand behind the scenes is that they have contacted probably 4 or 5 different athletic departments to say, "Hey, we might be coming. Can you accommodate us?" And they're
Gotcha.
thinking about the logistics too. I mean, they're not going to go from Gainesville, Florida to Pullman, Washington. That's just impossible, right? Because they drive all of their equipment all the way across the U.S. And
Oh
so,
wow.
you know, their convoy of semi trucks is not going to make it that far across the U.S. And so they've got to think about the regionality and the accessibility. And you know, as you know, it's hard to get to Pullman, Washington. So that's been stacked against us a little bit as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, they'll contact 4 or 5 different athletic departments, and the housing has to be available to house all of their folks and their talent, and there has to be an airport nearby that they can get Herb Street out of. You know, there has to be all these factors that they have to deal with to try to get around. And I think the only game that you know they're going to be at every single year is Army Navy. That's
Mm,
it.
gotcha. Well, let's talk about Old Crimson logistics. What's the behind the scenes? How does this work?
Yeah, you know, it used to be a lot more difficult
Yeah.
than it is today, and we still, I mean, honestly, we still have a lot of challenges logistically because you're counting on a private company to ship it around, and sometimes I'll try to avoid that as well if I can. But you know, we keep a series of backups because we've had a lot of really close calls. But you know, by and large. The show goes to familiar places that are kind of accessible. So, you know, our leading all time leading waivers. One guy used to live in Michigan, now is back in the Seattle area. Craig and Allison McDonald, because he was always going to the Big 12 games, yeah, or excuse me, the Big 10 games. You've got Michigan and Ohio State, and they're always going to go to those 2 schools. Michigan State on occasion, right? So relatively accessible for him to kind of get around. And then, you know, we have a group of people who are actually probably the all-time leaders now, although I lost count several years ago in the Atlanta area, including Greg Trinkle, who's probably the leader now. But, you know, anytime they go to Clemson, South Carolina, Alabama, the SEC championship game, you know, even up into North Carolina and Tennessee, usually it's all accessible from Atlanta somehow. So those 2 hubs aside, what typically happens is the show announces where they're going to go, and then my email blows up with people wanting to wave the flag. Which, you know, it's a little caveat that I find is pretty funny is that, you know, there are now, and this is fascinating to me. There are now people who are graduating from Washington State who have never known a period of their life where the Coug flag wasn't flying on college game day.
Wow. That's cool.
Right? Yeah, right. And so they are graduating and they're saying, it's been my lifelong dream to be a part of this.
Yeah.
And who am I to deny them, right? I'm not going to prevent anybody from waving the flag. If you want to wave the flag, let's figure out how we do that. But they crack me up when they send me a message like, hey, I'm moving to pick your place. Could you just let me know when the flag is coming by? And I'm like, nope. I would love to, but I don't know how I'm going to do that. It's the best approach for you to tell me when you want to go to a show, and then I'll make sure that we connect you with the group that week. So inevitably, I get a bunch of people who will say, "Hey, I really want to wave," and my goal every week is to find somebody who has waved before, who I know is a Coug,
Yeah.
and that I can ship the flag to them. So there's only a couple times when I get a little bit nervous. But and that's when we go somewhere brand new, and I don't know the people, and I don't know somebody who's going to be there, or when they go to the same place over and over and over again. So there was one year they went to Tallahassee, 2 or 3 years in a row. They went to Tallahassee like 4 or 5 times, and the folks who normally would wave in Tallahassee were like, I can't take another day off of work. I can't. Right? So I literally one day I had to have a woman who used to live in Tallahassee drive from she had moved to Austin, Texas, and she's like, I'll do it. Drove from Austin back to Tallahassee to make sure that we got the flag on the air. And it's those times where they've been the same place a million times. It's really tenuous, but yeah,
That is
by and large, not too bad.
wild to me. Like, the sheer unknowns every week. Like, you will find a way, but that has got to be a little bit stressful.
So honestly, the most stressful weeks are holiday weeks.
Yeah.
because I have less time.
Yeah.
Or if I'm traveling. So sometimes
Yeah.
I travel quite a bit for my job. I did it even more in my previous job. And I would be like in Australia and in game days on, like, oh, yeah, better take care of that. And thank God for modern technology, right? I can use an app. And we've switched back and forth between different providers, but right now we use FedEx. Which if you work at FedEx, please give me a call because your app isn't all that great. I have some suggestions for you on how to make that easier for people like me. But the reality of it is that the folks who have done this before know what to do. They roll up the flag, put it into the tube, and ship both flags off, and we keep an eye on it. And unless there's some sort of a storm, we haven't, knock on wood here, in the past couple of years, we haven't had too many issues where the flag has gotten lost. Though this past weekend we almost did. It didn't seem to have left Austin, and then somehow was missing in Memphis, but. We haven't had as many of the episodes where the flag is literally lost, and I have people beating down UPS doors and shouting at people and chasing around to different shipping departments. Like I had people one year in North Carolina, actually Greg Trinkle and a group of folks out of North Carolina were like literally driving around both Georgia and North Carolina 6 hours one way and 8 hours another way, driving to the UPS shipping center, because we were using UPS at the time, to try to find where the flag was. I mean, they're literally going everywhere in the middle of the night. And their families are like, you people are crazy. And they're like, yeah, we sure are. We're not missing the show. So, yeah. But, yeah, here we are.
What's been like the best game day that you've attended?
That I've attended. Ooh. So, I didn't get to go to the show in Pullman.
Me either. And all my friends went, and I still have regrets, but sorry, this is not about me. Continue. Yes, I agree. I had FOMO. I had so much FOMO that day.
Well, I actually was at a celebration of life in Hawaii that day. So it was Heidi. That's who it was. Heidi Robinson. Sorry, back to North Carolina. Heidi Robinson and Greg Trinkle driving around all over the place, trying to find the flag. Anyway, so that show for me. I love Army Navy every year. The fan energy it's different. It's a different energy. So I love to go to that game. Of course, I was in the Army, so go Army, beat Navy. Yeah, that's right, Jack Thompson. I'll see you in a couple of weeks, buddy.
I'll send this to him. Don't worry.
Yeah, he just texted me the other day. But anyway, but I think the favorite show for me had to have been, I can't remember the year. I want to say 11, 12, or 13, somewhere in there, where it was Texas number 2 or 3 Texas Tech versus number 1 or 2 Oklahoma in Norman, Oklahoma. That was a wild, wild day. It was windy. I think the pole broke, snapped. At the time we were using these PVC poles, and so the top of it snapped off and flew down and wrapped itself around the security guard standing at the edge of the pit, like the pole, back of the pole was around the back of his neck, and the flag was draped across the front of him. And we were like, sorry, buddy. And then I got to go to that game that night, which was a great game. But yeah, it was a good show.
That's amazing. So as we're kind of tying things up here, I'd love to put your provost hat on for a second and apply what you do and what you know to WSU. And what advice do you share with your learners, as you said, but what advice would you give to Cougs who are either starting school or maybe finishing up their time at WSU in the coming months?
Oh man, this is one of my favorite speeches to give.
Oh no.
Yeah, the provost top 5. I'll try to do this. As fast as I can. Give me just a second to write these down here.
Gotta whip out the note cards and let the whole paper fall down with all of the detailed notes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so my first tip and my first requirement is go to class. number one, go to class. That's what you're here for. You got to go to class, right? I know it's college and nobody wants to go to class, but this is the reason that we're here. And the most important thing that you can do for your life is to get a bachelor's degree. And honestly, I know that your parents are telling you have to get a bachelor's degree in X because you got to get a job. But you and I both know that people change jobs numerous times over the course of their career, and the absolute most important thing that you can do is get a bachelor's degree. Unless you want to be a lawyer or a doctor immediately, the best thing you can do is just get that bachelor's degree. It's super, super important. The second thing I tell people is, learn about who you are while you're at school. It's okay to be authentically you. And my story here is that I've been at Shenandoah 18 months or so, but they do this sort of analysis, 360-degree review survey sort of thingy around campus, and they did one around this time last year, and I had been at Shenandoah all of 6 months, and so the results came back on it for mine. And one of the quotes in there was, "He hasn't been here very long. He seems a little weird." So of course I made T-shirts out of that. Like, seems a little weird, which, why wouldn't you? So this is what I tell young people is it's okay to be a little weird, especially because you're in college, right? And celebrate who you are and be okay with that and get comfortable with other people being weird, and don't be afraid to, reach out to other folks who seem weird too. My third tip is that it is really important to take advantage of everything on campus. This one's slightly less fun, but there's so much happening. If you don't try it, if you don't go on an experience, then you're really missing out. And this is the time to do it, right? You learn a lot about who you are. My fourth tip is that you got to reach out to your loved ones, like, with regularity. And this is a good week to do that. Thanksgiving week here, right? To remember that they miss you and they're worried about you. And the story that I normally tell, and my friends from college, my roommates will certainly remember this, because when I was going to school, we had these things called answering machines, where, your folks or friends could leave a message on it. We didn't have cell phones. And anybody could listen to it, right? Because you share an answer machine and they push the button. And my mother would leave 3-minute long messages on our answering machine, but every message would start exactly the same way. And the first thing she would say is, "Hi, honey, are you pooping?" Followed directly with, "Are you eating?" Right? And so, when I tell this story to all of my incoming students, they all laugh, like you, and all the moms are like, "Yeah, exactly. That's what we want to know," right? Because they want to know, are you eating healthy? Are you taking care of yourself? And they just want to hear from you. So yeah, it's important to reach out and let them know that you're doing well and regular, I guess. And then the last message I have is, and my friend Chad, who went to WSU also, he will dispute whether I'm conflating stories or not, but that's not really the point. There was a time when I was a freshman and he was a senior. It was the fall of our freshman year, or maybe it was the spring of my freshman year, and he was a senior about to graduate. And we wanted to go out and party and have a good time. And so, I'm on the phone, and these are the phones that you had to connect to the wall back then, right, with a really long phone cord. And I'm in my room over at Stimson Hall and hinting at him, because it's snowing Pullman style, where it's 4 feet of snow in an hour. And I'm hinting at him to come pick me up, right? And he goes, "All right, well, I'll see you when you get here." And he hangs up on me. And then leaves his phone off, right? So now I just get a busy signal when I try to call him back. And so I, walk my happy tail all the way over to his house. And this is, I think he was in Chief Joe or something like that. But anyway, so you walk down the stairs of his place, and right in front of you is a wall that's blocking the living room area and the kitchen. And it forces you to turn right and right to the bathroom. And so I, go down the stairs and I turn right, and there's Chad, fresh out of the shower with a hairdryer, and a towel wrapped around him. And he says to me, just leans over his shoulder, and he's blow drying himself. And he goes, "Hey, all you had to do was ask." Mm. And there it is. That's the best lesson I ever learned at Washington State, is all you got to do is ask. And so I tell my freshman students and anybody who's coming to Shenandoah, look, you got to ask. We don't know everything that's going on in your life. And, you may not have a funny story of your naked friend with a hairdryer, but just remember, all you've got to do is ask.
That's great. That's just good life advice. Everyone could learn from that one. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, time for a couple fun questions.
All right,
and then we wrap it up with a bow here. So, CJ, of all the Coug games, just in general, teams we play every single year, what is your must-watch game if you had to pick one?
It's the Apple Cup, obviously. Aside from that?
I mean, it could have been a Beaver situation, hometown,
I mean, like if I can, I'll go to the Oregon game because we always beat them, which I really enjoy. Like for some reason, they can't figure us out.
I know.
Years. Yeah, I've been to Autzen so many times when we upset the Ducks. I love going to that game, but you got to watch the Husky game.
Yeah. I mean, a couple days away.
I'm one of those people who's like, yeah, we should have it on a Saturday so fans can be there, but I don't like the fact that it's at 10:30 at night on the East Coast. It's like, come on, guys, come on, Pac-12.
Yeah. Hashtag or at simple Pac-12.
Yeah.
Okay, moving right along here. If you were to get a drink in Pullman right now, where would you go?
Oh, that's not even a question. I'd go to the Coug.
Well, you said my office earlier, so.
I would absolutely go to the Coug.
Yeah.
That's a staple, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I remember back to the days when you could get a $5 pitcher in the Coug and you couldn't even move in there. I mean, the floor was so sticky you weren't falling over, but it was so packed you couldn't move. But yeah, you got to go to the Coug.
Got to go to the Coug. And then last question, if you had to describe your time at WSU in one word, what would it be?
I think I would say impactful. I mean, that's not that much fun of a word, right? But it shaped my life in really incredible ways. I mean, there are still ways I discover that the things that faculty at Washington State were doing that we as students didn't know they were doing to help us learn and become, citizens of the U.S. and of the world. Those things I find today, everything from a writing portfolio to global experiences to, simple educational techniques they were using in the classroom. And I don't know that students and recent alumni or even older alumni recognize the depth of impact that the faculty and staff in Pullman, Washington have on their lives for the rest of their lives. And I hope they do.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. Where can we direct people to support Old Crimson and keep that party going?
Yeah, well, we have a website, olcrimson.org. You can find us there. Every once in a while, someone will either tweet out or Facebook out or Instagram out a link to oldcrimson.org. But go to oldcrimson.org, and that's actually the stories there. Pictures of shows are there. Of course, you can always, if you desire to wave the flag at some show and one's coming near you, don't blow up my email right now. But if you see a show coming your way, just email flag@oldcrimson.org and we'll get you.
Perfect. CJ, thank you so much for all of this. This was so much fun and informative and just, a really enjoyable conversation. So thank you.
Well, I'm really grateful that I had the chance to speak with you and that you're doing this podcast. So thanks for doing that, and hope I was as fun as some of your other guests. I don't know if I was, but
no, you did great. The cool thing is we all got that Cougar connection. Like that's what it's about, and everyone's journey and story is different, but that core vein of just compassion for other Cougs is what rings true for everyone, and I love hearing all of that. So thank you.
No, thank you, and we'll see you waving a flag sometime.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm going to apply. I mean, I live in Kirkland, so I'm sure I have a little bit of competition, but...
Well, you don't have to apply. You just have to go wave.
You just have to ask.
Yeah, all you got to do is ask. That's it.
Yeah. Thanks, CJ, and go Cougs.
Go Cougs.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for hanging out with us on the CougsFirst podcast. We hope you leave feeling inspired, entertained, and encouraged to support yet another awesome Cougar-owned business. If you like what you heard, do us a huge favor and leave a review for the CougsFirst podcast on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on the latest episodes, and please share this podcast with your fellow Cougs. And remember to thank CougsFirst for all of your products and services. But until the next episode, let's end it with a good old-fashioned Go Cougs!